Welcome everybody. My name is Sean Thibodeau. I'm the coordinator of community planning for the Pollard Memorial Library in Lowell. It is my distinct pleasure tonight to welcome a dear friend of mine, Maile Shoul, who is a trainer, a registered KonMari Method decluttering maven. Is that fair?
Yeah, perfect.
And she'll be helping us get a good start on the new year and learn about the KonMari Method. And take it away, Maile.
Great, thank you so much. So as Sean said, my name is Maile Shoul. I am a certified KonMari Method professional organizer. And I want to say thank you so much to the Pollard Library, and thank you to Sean for hosting me tonight. And thank you to all of you for spending your evening with me. So I'm going to share my screen in a moment. We're going to go through a presentation about the KonMari Method, but just to let you know a little bit about how our time together will work. So we have about an hour and a half or so. We'll have plenty of time for questions and discussion. And we're going to break the evening kind of in two parts. As I said earlier, I like to leave like a very small break, about halfway through, 1 to 2 minutes, not too long. I want to keep everyone focused. But the first section, we're going to be going over the basics of the KonMari Method. And the KonMari Method is something that, you know, it might not be easy to declutter your home or your life, but it's a method that's actually very simple. So I will be giving you all of the kind of simple points and then going kind of more in depth because, you know, on the surface of it, the KonMari Method is basically just 2 checklists, but there is a deeper philosophy, and having an understanding of that philosophy can really help you grasp it on a deeper level and help you apply it to your life. So that'll be the first part. And then the second part, we're going to go through some exercises where you will be doing some brainstorming and thinking about how to apply the KonMari Method in your own home and your own life. So if you want to participate with that, all you'll need is like a piece of paper and something to write with. And then you can take those exercises and use them moving forward. So we have, you know, we have a really good number of people today. So if anyone wants to, you know, I'll pause periodically and ask you questions. And whatever you feel more comfortable with, if you want to unmute yourself and just answer the question, that's great. If you'd rather put it in the chat, you can do that as well. And if you do have any questions that come up, feel free to put those in the chat or unmute yourself. And Sean and I will do our best to monitor those questions to make sure that we get to all of those.
Thanks,
so to start with, I'd love to ask each of you, you know, share whatever way you feel comfortable. What motivated you to sign up for this workshop tonight?
My husband keeps telling me I need to throw things out.
Got it.
Thank you, Donna.
Thanks for sharing that, Donna. So it sounds like you have, so your spouse was kind of maybe nudged you to, that kind of motivated you.
Yes.
Great. That's great. And we'll be talking about family dynamics and how those apply to this system. So that's awesome. Thank you. Anyone else? What motivated you to sign up and spend your time with us tonight?
I'll say I was motivated to book you not only because I, you know, have a fondness for you as a person, but I remember seeing I think forget her name. I'm not going to pronounce it correctly, but Marie Kondo, is that right?
Marie Kondo, yep.
Marie Kondo.
Yep.
Or there was a show on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched a few episodes of that, and I went through my clothing and thought about doing some books, but noted and didn't get any further than that. And noticed my clothing could probably use a different going through, and I just sort of maybe, I don't know. I'm interested in the method because it seemed like it was a better way to kind of purge things in a like a wholehearted way, and in a way that like strips away shame and guilt and like you know, so I'm looking for motivation from you and maybe learn a thing or two that I haven't already gotten from the one show that I watched.
That's great. That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, one thing I really love about the KonMari system, as we'll talk about this, is that it really is a very compassionate system. It talks about kind of some of the emotional parts of it, because when you think about it, some of the roadblocks for decluttering are that we have an emotional attachment to our possessions, and as we should. And this can make it difficult, but we can also kind of use that emotional component to help us with the decision making. So if you've seen the TV show or if you've read the book, you probably, or even if you read like an article about her, you've probably heard the phrase spark joy. So that's become kind of like this catchphrase. And that is actually kind of the underlying philosophy behind the whole system. So we'll talk more about that. Excellent. Anyone else want to share kind of what motivated you? I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, great. So hopefully you can see my screen, and just going to put this in present mode. Okay, here we go. So we will be talking about creating peace and sanity with the KonMari method. Because who couldn't use more peace and sanity at home, especially in this year. The pandemic has changed so many things, and it's also changed, it's changed my philosophy as well, in my relationship with my stuff, and my relationship with the KonMari method, and it may have for you, for some of you as well. So I want to talk just a little bit about myself, just to introduce myself to you. So as I said, my name is Maile. I live in Western Massachusetts in a small town of Orange. And I'm a certified KonMari consultant. So I was really drawn to the KonMari method because I am not a naturally organized person. I think there's two kinds of people who are drawn to this work. The first type are the people who have categorized things from the time that they were very small. They color coded their Legos, their books were always in order, their backpacks were really neat. I was not that child or that adolescent or that adult. So when the books came out, I read it once. I thought it was interesting. I kind of applied it, to one or two categories, kind of like Sean mentioned. But it wasn't until I became a homeowner and moved from, a series of small city apartments to a bigger house in the country where, somehow my stuff just kind of started accumulating and multiplying. And then, one day I kind of looked around and realized that we just had too much stuff that wasn't serving us. So I decided to try to apply the KonMari method in earnest. And it struck me because it was the first time that I had always thought that I was a naturally messy person. It was the first time that I was able to, create some order and some calm in my life. And if any of you have read the books or seen the TV shows, you might remember that Marie Kondo mentions that once you apply the KonMari method to your home, you might also apply it to other things in your life. So the whole philosophy, if you take away nothing else from tonight, I just want you to take away one thing, which is we only want to keep things in our home that spark joy. And we can talk a little bit more about what that definition is. But once you apply that definition of only keeping things that spark joy, you might find that you apply it to friendships, to relationships, to jobs. So, people have shared stories with me in the past of, cleaning out the clutter in their homes can sometimes lead to cleaning out, clutter in other aspects of their life. So I think it's a really positive thing. You have been warned, it can lead to big changes. But it's not just about the possessions. It's a whole philosophy that you can apply to your life. So before we get into the details of the KonMari method, I want to take a little bit of a zoom out and think about the bigger picture of the global cost of clutter. For typically, if you've come here to this workshop, I probably don't need to convince you that clutter doesn't impact just our individual lives or households. It also has an impact on the planet. We're dealing with a climate crisis here that was driven in part by an increase in manufacturing. And that increase in manufacturing and energy consumption was driven in part by a huge increase in consumer goods. So, one of the statistics that I find very striking is the amount of consumer goods that Americans consume. So the last one I read about the amount of solid waste, of like household waste that we consume, is Americans make up 5% of the world's population, but we discard 50% of the world's solid waste. So if you think about that disproportionate number, it is very disheartening. But on the flip side, it does mean that as an American, you do have the ability to have a big impact if you become more conscious about what you're consuming and what you're buying. I want to always emphasize that the KonMari method is not a minimalism program. So that's a common misconception, in that, Marie Kondo only wants you to have like a closet of, 7 things, or like 15 books, or, 2 napkins, whatever. It's not that kind of a prescriptive program. Different people have different preferences and different needs. So it's not about having a small amount of things. It's about being mindful and kind of having a greater consciousness of what you are consuming. So that's a little bit of the global cost of clutter. Oh, and I also like to mention that, another sign of the increased consumption around the world is the self-storage business. So it's definitely a good business to get into if you want to make money. It's grown to $38 billion a year. And that's a huge sign of the fact that people have a lot of stuff. And not saying the self-storage is bad, it can definitely serve a purpose. But it's a whole multi-billion-dollar industry that didn't exist just a few decades ago. So then we can dial down into thinking about the personal cost of clutter. So if you think about, one of the exercises that we'll go through is, what does clutter cost you in your personal life? So some of the costs could be, a literal financial cost. If you have multiple, if you can't find a certain object, or if you have multiple objects, whether it's flashlights or umbrellas or, a red sweater, you don't know where it is, and then you have to buy another one, that's a literal financial cost that your clutter is putting on you. There's the cost of stress, of being visually overwhelmed, or having to find things, or having to find documents. There's the cost of time. And then in some cases, there's the cost of increased housing. Housing size, they're starting to actually go down now, but for years and years, they were going up and up and up, and people were buying houses that were bigger and bigger and bigger. I know a lot of people who've gone from a junk drawer to a junk room. So, how many of us have an entire room in our house that is dedicated not to living space or activity space, but just to storage? And that's actually been a motivation for a lot of my clients to apply the KonMari method to their lives. I know someone who had a storage room that she really wanted to use for a craft room instead. So she had that motivation to kind of get her through the work of the KonMari method. So we'll talk a little bit about Marie Kondo. So Marie Kondo is a Japanese professional organizer, and she has written a number of books and has starred in a Netflix television show, which is really great. And who here has read the books or watched the show? Anyone? Yeah.
I watched the show, and
Yeah.
for folks that are new to Zoom, there's or old to Zoom changed up how the reactions are a little bit. So if you want to raise your hand or something like that, they're under reactions now. It's no longer in the participants window. Or you can certainly, like Maile said at the top,
Here we go.
just come off mute and talk as well. We have a small enough crowd that you're certainly welcome to do that at any time, so long as you're not being disruptive.
Yeah, I see. Martha, did you unmute yourself?
I did, yeah.
Yes, great.
Yeah, I just joined now. I'm sorry I was late.
Oh, no
Okay.
worries. We're just talking about the about Marie Kondo and the books that she's written and the show that she started. And I'm sure that most of them are available at the Pollard Library as well. But the first one on the left is The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. So this is her international bestseller. It's sold millions and millions of copies. It's been translated into many languages. And it's actually a really fun read. You know, I think a lot of people who maybe have only read an article about Marie Kondo or who have heard about the method assume that she is someone who wants you to get rid of all your possessions. And if you read the book, you'll see that that's really not true at all. She's very self-deprecating. She's very funny. She talks about how she developed her method, how she used to try to get rid of her family members' things, you know, and the blowback that that created. But the book kind of very clearly lays out the method. So if you're interested in, you know, reading about the method, I highly recommend it. The next book that she wrote was called Spark Joy. So this is kind of a companion book. This goes a little bit more into detail about the storage methods. So you might have seen pictures or videos of the KonMari fold, where like all your shirts are, instead of being you know, on top of each other, they're stacked next to each other. It talks about folding methods and storage methods. And that's a really nice companion book. The picture in the middle is a still from her Netflix show. If you have Netflix, that's a really fun show to watch. I like that because it's a little different than like an HGTV before and after, which tend to be a little unrealistic to me. You know, Marie Kondo is not necessarily, and especially in the Netflix show, you know, the afters are not Pinterest perfect. I think they are much more realistic depictions of how the method can be applied in an average American household. She wrote a children's book called Kiki and Jax. This is a very cute picture book for younger kids. It's especially great if you have a child like my own 7-year-old daughter who really loves stuff and loves collecting. It's just a very gentle way to kind of introduce the concept of organization to children who can have a very, very strong emotional attachment to their things. There's a book, The Life-Changing Manga of Tidying Up. So this is a graphic novel, which is a lot of fun. I've heard a lot of teenagers really love it. I love graphic novels myself, so that's another great option. And then her latest book was called Joy at Work. So this talks about applying the KonMari method to the workplace. All right. So we're going to get into the 6 rules, but before we do that, I just want to pause and see if there's any questions at all. Questions or comments, either here in the chat. Great. All right. So we're going to dive into the 6 rules. So the 2 checklists that I mentioned at the top are really, you know, if you just have the 2 checklists, you'll be able to make huge, huge progress on decluttering your home. And the 2 checklists are the 6 rules, which we'll cover now, and then the 5 categories, which we'll cover a little later, and we will do a deeper dive into each one. So the 6 rules very briefly are: number 1, commit yourself to tidying up. Number 2, imagine your ideal lifestyle. Number 3, finish discarding first. Number 4, tidy by category, not location. Number 5, follow the right order. And number 6, ask yourself if it sparks joy. So now let's take a deeper dive into each rule so that you can really have an understanding of what it means and how you can apply it in your own home. So the first rule is to commit yourself to tidying up. So Sean, I'm going to go back to your example that you gave earlier about you watched the Netflix show And this, I've heard this example from many, many people before. You watched the Netflix show, you got really inspired, you did clothing, and then it was hard to kind of like take the next step to that next category. And a lot of people, they'll get an initial enthusiasm and do they'll take all their clothes out, do that category, and then it can be really hard to kind of lose, to keep motivation. And that's why I always recommend kind of taking a pause before you even start and really committing yourself to tidying up. So all this means is to take a step back and ask yourself, is this the right time to start applying the KonMari Festival to my home? So Marie Kondo calls completing all the categories, she calls that your tidying festival. And which is, I think, a much more positive way of saying it, as opposed to like, oh, I'm decluttering my home. It's doing your tidying festival. So the complete tidying festival, it technically involves reviewing all of your possessions in your home, and asking yourself each one by one, whether or not it sparks joy, therefore whether you're going to keep it or whether you're going to say goodbye to it. This can understandably be a very daunting task. For some people, if they live in, a small apartment and it's just them, that might take a couple days, a couple weeks. If you live with multiple different people in your household, a larger space, maybe there's a barn, there's a garage, this can take a couple months. And, I think you want to be realistic with yourself and just ask, is this the right time? What is my timeline? What do I want to do? And kind of set some milestones for yourself. If you read Marie Kondo's book, she recommends doing it kind of all at once within maybe like a 6-month period. I would say, I think you want to be, gentle and forgiving with yourself. For some people, in some circumstances, doing it all at once can be a really good thing, especially if you're close to retirement, you're downsizing, or you're moving. For other people, doing one category and leaving it and then coming back to the second category can work better. Stretching it out over a longer period of time is more realistic. So there's no perfect way to do it, but you just want to do some reflection and think about what kind of commitment works best for you. And I would say, you don't want to skip this step. Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
I noticed it says commit yourself. It doesn't say commit your family.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
And you're going to talk about that, but
that's
tricky.
It's very tricky. So this is something that I think is very important with the KonMari method. We're going to talk about family dynamics, but I want to introduce the kind of concept and the tenet that the KonMari method is not for your household, it is for yourself. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that. The KonMari method is not for your household, it is for your own possessions. So I know that someone had mentioned that they were here because their husband said that she needs to throw out more things. So that may, this whole conversation may resonate with you, maybe with a couple other people. Maybe it was your partner or your spouse or someone who wanted you to get rid of your things. Maybe you were the one who was trying to urge someone else to get rid of their things. So Marie Kondo has, she tells stories about how she tried to, declutter her family's possessions because, she didn't think they were using them. They were taking up too much space. But, if we make decisions about someone else's things, what do you think will happen?
Nothing good.
Exactly.
You're going to inspire, resentment and bitterness in that other person.
Yeah.
Or, spark an argument.
Exactly. So, what Marie Kondo says, it's so interesting. She says that the more intense your emotions are about the other person's possessions, the more of a sign it is that you have to deal with your own stuff. So I would say if you happen to be the party, where you're frustrated about your, partner's things, your children's things, by addressing your own things first, it's actually going to, well, it'll do two potential things. One, it will kind of, I think, kind of calm those emotions, and give you a sense of empathy, because you're really going to be going through your own things. The other thing is that it can lead by example. And I'll talk a little bit more about an experience I had with a client. But just as a concept, important to understand that this method is for your own things, not someone else's. If there is someone else in your household who owns possessions, obviously, in that household, if they were to do that with their possessions, you would want them to lead that process. It gets a little bit more complicated with children, depending on the age, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Any other questions, comments so far about rule number 1?
We'll be posting this video to YouTube, Donna, so you can share it with Peter.
All right.
I'm laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We all have we each have our own unique relationship with stuff. So the second rule is to imagine your ideal lifestyle. So this is another thing, an exercise that you want to do before launching into actually addressing your possessions, is some self-reflection. And after the break, we're going to walk through this exercise step by step. So what this means is you want to start with visualizing the end that you're aiming for. It's, just like a roadmap. You want to think about what your destination is, think about what your goal is. So the purpose for this is to help keep you motivated, because, this process, I'm going to be totally honest, it can be fun, it can be exhilarating, it can be work as well, especially after you get through a few of the categories. Once your energy starts to flag, you can have this ideal lifestyle visualization. This serves as your why. So once you have that motivation, you can really return back to that to remind yourself why it's worth it to input the energy to go through this whole process. So the third rule is to finish discarding first. This feels pretty intuitive to most people. Sometimes we will, before I really applied the KonMari method, I would often be motivated to organize, and I would go out and buy storage solutions first. So I would go to Target or like Bed Bath & Beyond and get bins, but those bins might not be the best solution. So then you've spent time and money and energy buying the solution before you actually know what you want to store. And the last thing you want to do is store things that you don't want to keep. So you always want to finish discarding first and then think about what your storage solution is going to be. I always warn people that it's going to get worse before it gets better. As you'll learn, the process for the KonMari method is that you do want to take out every single item of that category so that you can review it. That will make it a little bit messier beforehand, but it will get better. So this is something that you always want to warn family members. If you're going to embark on this process, you want to let them know what the process entails so that they know, that the state of your home may get worse before it gets better, but it's an investment of energy that's worth it. So the fourth rule, and I think that this is really where the magic starts, is to tidy by category, not location. So this was something that I found really kind of revolutionary about the KonMari method, and some people are really resistant to it as well. So what this means is that instead of, kind of the old method of organizing first your bedroom, then your kitchen, then the living room, then the office, it's a totally different method that says start with one category. The first category is clothing. You do all of your clothing. And then only once clothing is done, then you move to the second category. So the reason for this is that by taking, let's use books actually as This I think is a better example to illustrate this point. But if we're organizing books, you might have books, especially if you're a book lover, you might have books in your bedroom, cookbooks in the kitchen, in the living room. You may have books all over your house. So instead of doing it room by room, by addressing the category as a whole, it'll give you a more realistic inventory of what you have in that category, which will help with the decision making. So again, people can be resistant to this, but I always urge people to trust the process because it is kind of magical.
And I would attest just briefly, if you think like taking all of your clothes out of your bureau and out of your closets and putting them on your bed to look at everything all at once isn't going to be intimidating, it is. It's going to be like, how do I have so many clothes? There's no way that I need, and like just looking at the volume of that is something that is, I think it's a little bit life-changing too. But you have to
Totally.
look at it all at once, because otherwise, you're just seeing one drawer or another drawer, or, one part of the closet or this other closet or that kind of thing. So bringing everything together
Exactly.
to analyze it as a whole is a pretty amazing experience.
And I think intimidating is a great word because that's what prevents us. I think that's what prevents a lot of us from doing it in the first place. But the intimidation is actually kind of the point and is the magic of it, because otherwise we're literally hiding away our possessions. And we're not able to understand the true volume that we own. And then you'll see, maybe you have 3 red sweaters and you only need 1 or you only need 2, or you only want to keep 1 or 2. So that is, sometimes, I guess it's I don't know if it's Zen or whatever, but it's like sometimes the hardest part is actually the most beautiful part. The struggle is the point. So don't be afraid of that struggle, even though it can feel hard at first. So the 5th rule is to follow the right order. So the right order. So this also is kind of like, is kind of part of the magic. But Marie Kondo does prescribe a very specific order. We'll go into that in detail of what to follow. And again, some people are resistant to it, but I always say, try to trust the process, try it, see what it's like. You might discover that it really does resonate. And then the last rule, which might be the most magical of them all, is to ask yourself if it sparks joy. So if you've ever, tried another organization method, or if you've read articles about organizing, there's all kinds of suggestions that people have about what possessions you should own. Maybe you've heard of the concept of like a capsule wardrobe, which is kind of like a minimalism concept of only have 20 things that you wear and that you rotate. Or everyone needs to have, for kitchen items, everyone needs this certain knife and this certain spatula, and like you don't need this appliance, and et cetera, et cetera. But we're all so different and have such different preferences and different relationships with things that someone who's, for example, a costume designer and truly loves clothes, they're going to have a different idea of what clothes they want than someone who wears the same outfit every day, but their thing is books. They want to surround themselves with lots and lots of books. So the KonMari method really argues that there is no one prescription for the number of things or type of things that's going to work. And the only thing that really dictates it is your own intuition. So this, I think, is very liberating because the only rules that you really have to follow are your own. And the only test for it, it's not in your brain. It really is more of a gut thing. And all you have to do is ask yourself if it sparks joy. So, this phrase has definitely become kind of like a household phrase. And I like to share this little cartoon from the New Yorker where you have a burglar stealing some items, but he's really reflecting on it and he's asking himself, do I need it? Does it spark joy? He's not going to steal just anything. But I find that this is really helpful. So actually, before we get into the 5 categories, I am going to back up. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this spark joy concept. So
Because
actually,
it's a
I'll
little
pause here.
woo-woo, isn't it?
It's a little woo-woo. Yeah, it could be a lot woo-woo. So does anyone have any thoughts about this, about the phrase or about the concept?
I have a few.
Yeah,
It's
please.
I don't know. I found it was maybe easier in the beginning, and then as I went through, because I only done close, got a sneak peek at the categories, and
Yeah.
close are the first one, like you were saying. And I went through my close, and I was like, I had an idea of what that meant, and then it kind of changed, and then I kind of lost it as I was going through it. And I had to sort of take a break, but then I think I started it a little late in the day, and I needed to have a bed back to go to sleep that night.
Right.
So it got kind of too quick, and I think by the end, I had kind of discarded the spark joy concept, because you're really supposed to like hold every garment right in front and look at it and think to yourself in your heart of hearts, does this spark joy? And if it does, you keep it. And if it doesn't, you thank it for you express gratitude to it for being in your life, for fulfilling the role it did for as long as it did. And then you say goodbye. And I probably just didn't know what I was getting into when I decided to do it. I hadn't fully committed, and I hadn't really created enough space to do it. But it was a bit nebulous as I went along, and I had to kind of get rid of it for time constraints.
Well, that's a great rundown of kind of the process of holding the item. And it sounds like you got a great start with kind of like going through that exercise. So sparking joy is really an exercise into connecting with your intuition about what objects really bring you joy. So there's a couple things I'm going to talk about an exercise that I walk through with clients, and then I want to talk about the definition of what joy means as well. So the reason why, so clothing is the first category. The reason why we start with clothing is that it's an object that we interact with every day. And it can be a really good one to start honing our intuition of what joy is. And there can be a lot of emotions, both positive and negative, that come up with clothing. So when I'm working with a client, we'll start with clothing. We will take all of their clothing out and put in what I call the staging area. Often the staging area is the bed, but you want to be kind of mindful of what staging area will work for you, because if it's going to take multiple days, the bed might not be the best one. So we'll put in the staging area, and then I'll say, okay, I want you to pick something that you want to keep. Your favorite piece of clothing, something that you absolutely love, without question, you want to keep it. So they'll grab, say it's a jacket. And then I'll ask them to tell me the story of that thing. Because, every single thing that we own has a story behind it. So they'll tell me the story, maybe it's that it fits perfectly. They love the color. They love the fabric. They feel really confident when they wear it. And it's their go-to to wear when they have a big event or an interview or, or a fun occasion. And I'll say, okay, they'll tell me the story, which I love to hear. And I'll say, listen to that, or remember that feeling, be aware of the feeling that you got in your body when you were telling that story, and that kind of like lift that you got when you were describing that object. That feeling that you get is that spark joy feeling. And you may get it with some objects, some categories are easier. Books can often be very easy. We might have a book that we really love that gives us that spark. You're never going to part with that book because it's really meaningful or useful to you. So we'll put it aside. That's in the keep pile. So then I say, On the flip side, choose a piece of clothing that you know you're going to get rid of, that you know you're not going to keep. So they'll grab that piece of clothing, let's say it's a pair of pants, and they'll say, you know, it was such a good deal. I got it on sale, but it's just not flattering. It's really itchy. The waistband digs into me. But you know, it was a good deal, or I paid a lot for it. I just feel bad getting rid of it, but I just do not like it.
Doesn't
So then
fit
I asked
anymore.
them to, what was that?
It doesn't fit anymore.
Doesn't fit anymore. It's, I look at it, it's scolding me from my closet. So, I asked them to then get in tune, get in touch with the feeling that you get in your body as you're describing that. That's the feeling, that's the opposite of sparking joy. If you're not getting a feeling of sparking joy, you don't want to keep it in your house. So that's the exercise that I go through. And, it really is, we have been given so many messages about often of thriftiness, which is not a bad thing, but it can have a dark side where if we are only buying things because they were a good deal, but we don't actually really enjoy using them, we're kind of dampening our intuition for what sparks joy. And obviously, we have constraints of money and resources that come into play. I'm not saying that we need to surround ourselves with like luxury items, like on the contrary. But we want to honor ourselves and respect ourselves, and really, as much as possible, aim to have things in our life that really do either make us happy and bring us joy or are very useful. So that's the exercise that I go through. I always get questions about, as far as spark joy, and people often bring up the same two things: toilet brushes and tax returns, right? So people say, my toilet brush doesn't spark joy, but I have to keep it. And my tax returns don't spark joy, but I have to keep those around for a couple of years. So in response to that, I would say, one thing that you can do is cultivate a sense of gratitude towards those things that might not be like the most exciting objects, but that you are still grateful for the function that they fulfill in your life. So if you have that toilet brush or the toilet plunger, people often mention that, maybe it's not the most exciting thing, but you're happy that you have it because it fulfills a purpose. And at least try to get one that doesn't make you miserable. Same with tax returns. They're boring, but we're thankful that they're there if we need them. So that is kind of an exercise in getting in touch with that spark joy piece of it. But yeah, I'd love to hear other questions, comments that people have.
So there's your favorite thing and then your least favorite thing. And there's got to be a spectrum between them.
Absolutely.
Where does the amount of non-joy, is there a guidepost for like this sparks some joy, but it's not really, or is there, I don't know, is there a way to like dial into the middle ground stuff? Because some things are slam dunk, some things are a little bit more nebulous.
There's a couple ways to think about it. So, budget is always a concern, and you want to respect, your budget and your financial reality. So one example that I had when I was going through my things was my raincoat. So I had one raincoat. It kind of made me miserable. It just wasn't a great quality. I didn't like it, but it just wasn't in my budget at that time to get a raincoat that did spark joy. Mm-hmm. So what I did is I kept the raincoat, but I made a plan for myself and I budgeted in that at some point in the future, I got a raincoat, and I made sure to get a raincoat that sparked joy. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's one example of something where, you may have to hold on to it for now, but you want to, we want to be wearing things and owning things that do spark joy, because it just kind of makes, it makes our experiences more pleasant. I would say if it sparks, and then there's kind of a balance, like I would say the more miserable it makes you, the sooner you should try to replace it with something that that sparks joy.
Hmm.
And sometimes, at the end of this, if people have like, sometimes what we'll do is we'll workshop like a specific object, like someone has like gifts can be tricky. But if any of you have an object around your house that you're kind of like ambivalent about, we can definitely workshop it there. And sometimes that's helpful in kind of like going through the concepts of it. Any other questions?
Thanks.
Comments or anything? But yeah, this is, this concept of sparking joy is, this can be really helpful. It can be really challenging, but it can be really helpful because you're really getting in touch with your own intuition. We are very like, especially in this culture, like we try to intellectualize everything. We try to like rationalize and think our way through solving a problem, but sometimes you do have to kind of get in touch with that intuition, as opposed to like that overthinking of it. So the next thing I want to go through is the 5 categories. So we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but the 5 categories and the order of this does matter are clothing, books, paper. The next category is komono. So this is a Japanese word that means small object or miscellaneous object. This encompasses everything else. This is actually a very large category made up of subcategories. And then the last one is sentimental. So can anyone guess what the logic is behind putting them in this order?
By the time you get to sentimental, you're kind of used to getting rid of stuff.
Bingo, exactly. So yeah, so as Donna said, the reason why it's in this order is that by the time you get to sentimental, that intuition muscle is much stronger. It goes from easiest to most difficult. So, in the past, you may have started to declutter, and maybe you're doing the old method of going room by room, and you start in, say, the bedroom. So you go through some clothes, you go through some books, and then all of a sudden you get to like that shoebox of old photographs. You get to, something that you got from a relative who passed away. You get to a really sentimental object that can cause an emotional roadblock and really derail the whole process. So that's why we leave the sentimental stuff until the very, very end, after which that intuition muscle is much stronger. And we're going to go a little bit more into each category as well. So I just want to share a little bit of the KonMari fold. So this is, Zoom workshops are great because, we can join from our living rooms. Unfortunately, I can't show you and have you practice the actual KonMari fold, but this is a small piece of the method that you can apply to your closet immediately. And this is something that's actually, I think it's really easy to sustain. But instead of the old way of like piling clothes on top of each other, you stack them next to each other. And it's actually almost like a bookshelf. Put on its side. So I find that, library patrons intuitively understand this because if you walk into a library, you're not going to see books, piled on top of each other. You're going to see a nice stack where you can see the spine. So you can apply that to your own drawers. So we're not really going to go into the fold, but this is a quick little diagram. And what I would advise you is if you're interested in learning about this, go to YouTube and search for KonMari fold, and you'll find dozens of great videos that'll show you exactly how to fold all kinds of things. All right, so just a few more slides before we take like a very quick 1-minute break. So a couple common pitfalls that often can be roadblocks for this process. So we've got family dynamics, having trouble letting things go, letting objects go, and then asking yourself what to do with it. So the family dynamics, we talked about this a little bit in that this is a process for your things, not anyone else in your household. And I will say that, you know, if you apply it to your own possessions, often family members, if they are, you know, if they feel less pushed, often a sense of curiosity will bubble up. So I'll share this quote from one of my clients. So this was Misty. She was the one in the household that was very tidy. And her husband and one of her children really liked accumulating things. But she shared with me after a session, she said, my family seems to be catching the tidying fever. Yesterday we did winter coats and shoes together. They each got in on it. I didn't even have to ask them to. So, you know, if you have, you know, children or, you know, live with anyone, having them declutter without you having to ask them to, that is like the definition of magic, in my opinion. So another pitfall is, you know, having trouble saying goodbye to things. So Sean mentioned this a little bit in his example about clothing, about something that doesn't spark joy. What you want to do to it is say thank you, and then put it in what I call the thank you pile. So this can feel a little or a lot woo-woo. It definitely did to me at first, but saying thank you to something is surprisingly effective at giving you closure. You know, you're not just tossing it in a bin, you really are expressing gratitude for the purpose that this object served in your life. And I find that, you know, the process can go slowly at first, but once you start, you know, kind of getting into the rhythm of picking something up, doing the spark joy test, either keeping it or saying thank you, you know, that can make it easier to let things go. But there's no perfect answer. You know, some things that are very challenging can be gifts. Sometimes, you know, we have a gift that it definitely doesn't spark joy, but we feel a real sense of guilt letting it go. And what Marie Kondo says in her book is that the value of a gift is not in, you know, it's the value of a gift comes when the gift is exchanged, you know, because it's more of an exchange of energy and emotion than an exchange of a physical object. You know, the physical object is just a representation of that emotion. It's not the emotion. That emotion will always be there. So saying thank you to that gift, and, you know, maybe it'll be donated and will spark joy in someone else. It doesn't mean that you're dishonoring the person that gave you that gift. Obviously, there can be family dynamics there. You know, if you have an aunt who gets very emotional about certain things and insists on seeing it displayed, maybe that's an exception you make. You store it away, you put it out when she comes to visit, and then you put it back in storage. But that, you know, thinking about that can help when addressing gifts. And then you have the question of, what do I do with it? So I always recommend, before you start on a category, you want to make a plan for where you're going to donate things, where you're going to recycle things, and then where you're going to, you know, if there are things that are just unusable and need to be thrown away, what your plan is for that. You know, identifying the places that will take your thank you piles beforehand is going to help the process go more smoothly.
Thank you, Piles. It's great.
All right. So just to review, for each category, as you go through it, you want to choose a time. So you're going to commit yourself, and then you want to, you know, schedule in a time. You know, this is a project where it's better, in my opinion, it's better done in chunks of at least 1 to 2 hours as opposed to 15-minute blocks. You know, I've had people who, you know, they try to fit it in between assignments and do like 15 minutes here, 15 minutes there. That, from my experience, can be really challenging. You know, if you can have at least a 1 to 2 hour block to set aside, you'll find that it's actually goes more quickly in the long run. You want to choose a time, choose a staging area. You want to gather everything in that category. You want to keep what sparks joy, and you want to say thank you to the rest. You want to discard your thank you piles, and then you want to choose simple storage. So, so what we just reviewed, we've got the 6 rules, the 5 categories, and then kind of this simple, the simple progression of what to do. You know, that really covers the process that is, it might not be easy, but it is simple. So I want to pause there and see if anyone has any questions or comments. Then we'll take a 1-minute break, and then we'll come back and do some kind of some exercises to help you reflect and prepare to apply this in your own homes. But yeah, any questions?
Just a comment that so I guess that you're the first person that I've heard articulate, have a plan for where it's going to go before you do it. I think that's,
Yeah.
I'm caught in a loop. It's easy to get rid of clothes, the paper, the books, even little things. And then
Yeah.
you get to sentimental, and I'm of a generation where we have stuff. We got china, we got
Yeah.
silver, we got cabinets full of the stuff, and nobody wants it. And so
Yes.
then you just go back and do the easy things. My
Mhm.
closets are immaculate.
Mhm. Right. Right. So Donna brings up a really good point of, you know, we've kind of reached peak stuff, and we've got a lot of antiques that there's kind of a glut in the market, unfortunately, of, you know, whether it's china or, you know, certain areas of furniture, and it can be really hard to, you know, to offload that. Like, as you said, no one might be buying it. Mid-century stuff, that stuff will go very quickly. So, so that's easy to sell. But other things, you know, it can be hard. And people always ask me, or people often ask me, like, what about selling things? You know, what is your advice on selling things? And I have mixed feelings. You know, there's definitely some things where you can, I just sold an old antique set of sterling silver that we were just not using. I sold it to replacements.com. They'll give you a quote on things, and they'll tell you, you know, if it's worth something, they'll tell you exactly how much they'll pay for it. If it's not, at least you'll know, you know, same with China. But I always want to remind people that time is money, and selling things is an investment of time. So if you're trying, you want to decide what is more valuable, you know, recouping a cost that may or may not be worth it, or the time and space of kind of, you know, having it out of your house. So, you know, selling it can be challenging. Some thrift stores may or may not say, take it. I have found better luck in, you know, there's groups called Free Cycle or Buy Nothing that are online. Some of them are on Facebook. Some of them have their own websites where people can give away things for free. That can be a great solution if you just want to kind of like free up the space in your home. And, you know, there are people in need who, you know, who would use a set of, you know, of china or silverware or furniture or anything like that. And then it can, you know, easily kind of move on to a better home.
I still think there's that little bit of sentimental value that, so you were say, I was hoping you know, you wanted your children to want mother's china or grandmother's china.
Right.
I'm just, so there's, I know, yes, so you would love somebody to say, oh, I would love that. They could have it, but
right.
It's
right.
just,
Totally.
I'm not moving, so I'm not in a
Right.
real hurry to get rid of it.
Right. I think that's a really, I think that's a great, you know, family dynamic to think about. And I think you want to just make the decision for yourself. And there's no right or wrong answer. It's very personal of, you know, if the family member doesn't want it, then what? You know, what solution would feel right to me? Yeah. Yeah. And if they don't, you know, that's their preference.
Yeah. Young people don't want that stuff.
Right. Right. And it might be, but some other young people might want that stuff, you know, and it might be a question of just, you know, finding a wider audience, and there might be someone who would really love it, but you just haven't met them yet. So. Okay. So let's take a very quick 1-minute break. Let's just stand up, stretch, get a drink of water, whatever. And then right at a minute at 7:35, we'll come back.
All right. Thanks, Maile.
Great. I'm gonna stand up for 1 minute. All right, so if we can make our way back. And Sean, I haven't figured out how to get to the chat. So just let me know if there's any questions that come in through the chat, just let me know.
Okay. I've been monitoring it.
Awesome.
Monitoring it, and there's been nothing yet, but I'll let you know.
Perfect. All right, so what we're going to do next is, so this is an opportunity for you each to do some reflection. I'm going to walk you through a couple of exercises. So this will help you, as we talked about, kind of like take a step back, commit yourself. We're going to go through the visualization exercise. We're going to go through some preparation exercises, and then you can keep these and use them as you go through your own tidying festival. So the first step, as you remember, is to commit yourself. So what I want you to do is just kind of think a little bit about your own situation, where you are, what your schedule is like, what your mindset is like, and think on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being 100% ready and committed, and 1 being not ready at all, probably wouldn't even be here tonight. How ready are you to start your KonMari Method tidying festival? So just choose a number, whatever feels right to you. And then you want to ask yourself, why did you choose that number? So if you chose a 7, why is it not a 6? But why is it not an 8? So just jot down why you chose that number. And then you want to ask yourself, what roadblocks might stand in your way? So maybe they're schedule roadblocks, maybe they're family dynamics, maybe there are some emotional roadblocks, reluctance.
Maile, Ginny's wrote something in the chat. Would you could you repeat very quickly the 6 rules?
Oh yes, so the 6 rules are, number 1 is commit yourself to tidying up. Number 2 is to visualize your ideal lifestyle. Number 3 is to finish discarding first. Number 4 is to tidy by category, not location. Number 5 is to follow the correct order. And number 6 is to ask yourself if it sparks joy. So we're going over, we're taking a deep dive into rule number 1, which is to commit yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to think about what roadblocks might stand in your way. So what we're doing, we're just anticipating problems, right? We're anticipating problems and we're brainstorming the solution to them. And then how might you address those? And then you want to ask yourself, when would you like to begin? So basically, when in the calendar year would you like to begin? Maybe you chose this week, to attend this week deliberately. Maybe now is a good time. Maybe now is not a good time. Maybe starting in February would be great. And then you want to ask yourself, when would you like it to end? Maybe you have a milestone that's coming up, or a life change that's coming up. You're downsizing, you're moving, your kids are moving out, your kids are moving in with you. So all this is doing is just kind of like pausing before you, throw open your closet doors. You're just taking some time to sit back and plan so that these roadblocks don't come up in the middle of the process. So this is for your own use, no obligation to share, but if anyone wants to share, or anyone has any questions or thoughts about this step, you can share. Anyone want to share what number they chose?
I think I'm obligated to share. No, oh, go ahead. Somebody else, Donna.
8.
8.
Chose an 8. Awesome.
An 8.
That's great, Donna. So why did you choose an 8?
Because I'm really committed to doing this. Again, I think my one roadblock then why it wasn't a 10 is the concern for wastefulness. I cannot stand to just throw something in the wastebasket if it could be used by anyone. Like my husband wanted to throw away a suitcase. I mean, it was beside me. It was a perfectly good suitcase. We were absolutely never going to use it. But in my head, I felt like someone could use it. So it's that wastefulness, finding a place for stuff to go.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's really important. And that's really great that you've identified that as one of your strongly held values, because that value is something that, I would not ask you to change that. I think that can be, some people try to ask themselves to really change that. But it's much easier to try to find a solution for that than to change a strongly held value. Or, sometimes people see a strongly held value with a new perspective. And I'll, just to keep kind of like working with this example, because it's such a good one, Donna, how are some ways that you might address that? So like the suitcase is actually a great example. So let's say you have a suitcase that it's not right for you. You've made that decision. So that's another step, making that decision of like the suitcase, keeping it or saying thank you. You've decided that's in the thank you pile. That's a huge step. But then what? Any thoughts about how you could stay true to your value of not wasting it and yet still removing it from your home?
Well, it's finding some place to donate it to. And I think then that's the, here, my poor husband, family dynamics, he wants it done and gone. He's very, very, very organized, very neat, done, gone. And so I would say, well, let me just put it in the garage until I find somebody who will take it. There's only, so.
Right.
And I think even during COVID,
he knows what that means.
It's even worse to try to find places to donate things to.
Right, exactly. So yeah, there are a lot of thrift stores that are not taking donations because of COVID. A lot of places that are not taking, trying to find a family member or a friend to take it as a donation, that can be very time intensive. So I would encourage you, if you haven't looked at it before, to look into the, so there's 3 resources that I use. So there's FreeCycle, which I don't have one local to me, but many communities do have a FreeCycle. There's the Buy Nothing community. And I'm sure there's one in your area. And then there's also the free section on Craigslist. So these are all online options, but I have never not been able to get rid of something that's still useful. Like people will take all kinds of stuff. So I would consider that, because that, that's definitely going to a good use, because people who answer that, they have a need for it. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, because I think that that's a very common situation. All right, so we
Couldn't help but
will,
notice,
yeah,
and I
Sean.
don't want to put anyone on the hot seat, but Eileen had taken herself off mute, and I wanted to see if she wanted to share.
Oh yeah, Eileen, do you have something to share?
Sure. I put down a 7. I live by myself, but I have a huge big home, and
Mhm,
I have lots of stuff that needs to be get rid of.
mhm.
And I find that it's so overwhelming. And I'm listening to you talking about this start with clothing, and I thought, well, I could do that. So
Mhm.
you asked, it's somewhat of a time commitment. So that was something that number 3, I answered, a time commitment. I also answered similar to the Donna, finding a place for the things that are really, really good, but you don't want to just throw them away. And I have to do things slowly. I have to think about things. I'm not a person that can just toss something. I can look at it and say, no, I don't want it, and get it in a bag if I know I don't want it. But there are those things that I have to think about. So I work more slowly, and I thought, well, time frame you're asking about, it's going to be a while.
Mhm. And
And
that's
I don't know
fine.
if that goes
Yeah.
along with the way you think things should be, but that's who I am.
I think that's great. I think that's great. I don't like when people, I don't rush people through the process. And I think, again, understanding your own style and your own need for reflection, I think is really important, and will help you in the process. And I think that that's great. And I would encourage you to, start the process and see how it goes. I find that people often start the process very slowly, and then will pick up pace, and then may sometimes slow down again, and that's fine.
I'm putting links in the chat of a Lowell Free Cycle group, and then it looks like there's a Facebook group for Buy Nothing in Lowell in general and Lowell Belvedere in specific.
Oh, excellent.
It's 2 groups.
Excellent. So yeah, these are fantastic. I really would encourage you, selling stuff is, it can be good, but again, don't get too caught up. One thing that I need to add to these slides is that, has anyone ever seen the triangle where it says, like, on one point it says, it's like quick, cheap, and good, or like time, cost, and quality. You can, whatever solution you have to whatever problem you have, can maximize like 2 of those things, but not all 3. So there's always going to be a trade-off that you have between time, cost, and quality. Okay, so we will go to, sorry, my slides are all over the place now. Okay, so moving on to the next exercise. So this is something that you can reflect on and write down if it helps you. So this is imagining your ideal lifestyle. So this is a really fun exercise because you get to visualize what you want your end result to be. And I'm not talking about having a Pinterest perfect or magazine perfect home. That is never my goal with my clients or myself, but it's really to, maybe it's to allow yourself to do certain activities or have a certain feeling when you come home. But anyway, we'll go through each of these questions. So the first thing I want you to do is write down how your home looks and feels right now. So you can just jot down some words. People often have a mixture of, things. Some things are positive, some things are more challenging.
A toy bomb went off.
Right there.
Merry Christmas.
All right, so then I want you to reflect on what is your clutter costing you? So we talked a little bit about the personal cost of clutter at the beginning. So apply this to your own life. What is it costing you? Is it costing you, is there a sense of stress that you have? Is it time? Is it arguments, with someone that you live with? Is it just the stress of not being able to find things? What is that personal cost to you? And then you want to ask, now this is where the visualization comes in. If you could wave a magic wand or snap your fingers, how would you make your home look and feel? You could write some adjectives. You could write, write a few sentences about this. And really emphasis on the feeling. And then the last thing I want you to answer is, how would your life change if your home matched this vision? So what would be different in your life? Prior to COVID, a lot of people would say, oh, I could have people over more. I would be, I would throw more dinner parties. That's a little more challenging now, but, maybe it's, I would feel more relaxed. I could use the craft room. I would watch movies more because I could relax in my living room. So this exercise is your why, so you can hold on to this as your motivation of kind of what you're aiming towards. And this can kind of help you as things do get more challenging and as things do take time. And this may change too, as your life circumstances may change, or you discover different motivation that you didn't necessarily have tonight. And does anyone want to share a little bit about what they put as their why? No obligation. But hold on to this, because I think pausing and reflecting and thinking about, what your reason for doing this can be very, very important. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit more about each category. Here we go. Okay. So the exercises for this, you can write it down if you want. If not, it might be enough to just kind of reflect upon it. But the exercises are really going to be the same for each category. So this is an opportunity to kind of talk about some solutions. So we have already talked a little bit about clothing. So I'm not going to dwell too much here, but you want to think about what your staging area will be, how long it might take you to complete clothing. You want to plan for where you're going to get rid of these things. Do some research on the resources first, and that'll make it go much more quickly. And then you do want to anticipate what emotions might come up during this time. These are the things, any category can cause emotions. With clothing, sometimes there's emotions that come up around like weight gain and weight loss. So a common question I have is like, what should I do with those clothes that don't fit me? Either they're too big and I think that I may, I may go up a size and need them, or I may go down a size and need them. What do I do with that? So I say, there is no right or wrong answer. It's very personal. But what I always say to people is that when you open up your closet, your clothes are sending you a message. And you want to make sure that that message that they're sending is a positive one. So if you have clothes, whether they're a different size or whatever, if you have clothes that are scolding you, that might not be the best message to send, and putting them in the attic or the basement might not be the solution. It might be, but the attic and the basement can be really kind of tricky traps that trick us into actually holding on to those things that don't spark joy. So just do some reflection about, on this, ideally ahead of time, so that you're ready to make a decision when you are actively sorting clothing. So the next thing I'll go to is books. I love talking about this with library patrons because, you know, obviously most of you are book lovers. You might have a ton of books at home, or, you know, maybe all your books come from the library. So people are at very different places with this. But I always want to emphasize that one of the rules of doing this process is that you want to remove all your books. You want to take them out of the bookshelf, and you want to put them in your staging area. So this can be challenging, you know, depending if you have some physical limitations, this can be heavy, and you might need some assistance with this. So, you know, you just want to anticipate that and get help as you need it. But taking out all the books, you know, it gives you a chance to dust them off, go through the books. You might find old notes, old bookmarks. People found cash in books. You'll find magazines that are jammed in between your books. But, you know, for some people, this is a very big category and they've got hundreds and hundreds of books. And some people who have hundreds and hundreds of books, they might get rid of only, you know, 10 or 11 of them. And that's perfectly fine, as long as you are, you know, using your intuition and deciding which books spark joy. And I always say, do not assume that the library is taking donations, because they might not be. So always, you know, be kind to your local library and call first. But if they're not taking donations, you do want to just do some research into finding out what other places are taking book donations.
And for the record, we are not currently accepting donations. So
Yeah, and that's the case in many libraries. So we haven't talked much about paper, and a lot of people really dread doing paper because it can be boring. This is actually one of my favorite categories, because a lot of people have paper like, it's kind of like dust, you know, paper just kind of like covers every available surface in our homes. And once you get to paper, this can be the category that makes a very big visual impact. So this can be great because the decision making, it can be easier, and it can have a really good kind of return on the time investment. So with paper, and I want to just give the disclaimer, like I always talk about personal papers, not business papers, because every field is so different. So if you're sorting papers for like a business that happens to be in your home, you know, you'll want to consult with, you know, an expert in your field or your accountant or a lawyer. But for personal papers, you want to decide on what your staging area is, think about how long it will take, have a plan for either shredding or recycling, and then thinking about what emotions might come up. So just some tips about paper. You're going to want to gather all the papers. Don't worry about the categories yet. And you're going to have a couple piles. Number one is the things that you are completely discarding, most likely recycling those. Number two is your archive pile. Okay, those are the things that you have to keep for whatever reason, but you don't need to take any action on them. So maybe it's, you know, tax returns from the past couple of years, or, you know, medical records, vaccination records that you have to keep. So that's your archive pile. And then your third pile is your to-do pile. So let's say it's a bill that you have to pay, you know, something that you have to sign, but something that needs action. But then your action pile, as soon as it's been acted on, should either be archived or recycled. Any questions about paper?
we talking like magazines and
So
catalog
magazines,
offers and like weird
magazines, some people put magazines into books. But magazines could be either, you know, but really it's any paper, you know. Sometimes people are like, oh, what about, things could fall into different categories. Oh, I should say, this is very important for all the categories. If something is sentimental, sentimental trumps any of the other categories. Okay, so if it's in,
Pull it
if
out
it's
of the
in,
way.
exactly. So if it's in paper, but it's also sentimental, don't do it now, defer it to sentimental. So children's artwork is classic. You know, that can be a very difficult one. Put that in sentimental. Cards and stationery, that could be considered like in the next category of miscellaneous. Paper is typically bills, receipts, bank statements, tax returns, medical records, things like that. I always encourage people, you know, I personally don't keep any bank statements. I get those all electronically, credit card returns. If you have the option of going paperless where it never even crosses your threshold, that's ideal. But if you have to get it mailed to you, you know, keeping bank statements and credit card statements is typically not necessary. You know, keeping receipts if you're going to need it for tax purposes, or potentially returning it. You know, you may need to keep it, but I would definitely try to, you know, be pretty judicious about what you keep.
How do you feel about the fridge?
Put it like displaying papers
Yeah, paper, photo,
on the fridge.
stuff that's on your fridge. Is that stuff you take down and hold up?
Yeah,
Do you
absolutely.
keep your fridge clean?
Absolutely. We have, my fridge has gone through a couple different phases. I have removed a lot of the artwork, but not all of it. You know, we still have a bunch of paintings and stuff like that, photos. So it's really whatever works for you.
Right. And as I think about it too, I think about like commonly held property, you know, photographs, children's
Yes.
artwork is not like, I can't make a judgment on my own
Right.
necessarily.
So that's a perfect transition to the next subcategory, which is the komono. So komono, again, is a Japanese word for a small object. It's a little misleading that this is one category because it's really several different smaller categories. So in order to figure out like what subcategories, all you have to do is look around your house. You know, this will include like bathroom products, you know, like shampoos and, you know, stuff like that, soaps, hobbies, anything in the garage, stationery, you know, pens and pencils, stuff like that, flashlights, batteries, umbrellas, kitchen stuff. Yeah, so kitchen is a giant one. So kitchen is one where it's, unless you live alone, you're gonna have to have like a shared decision-making process for kitchen. So typically with clothing, they're all yours. Books, you know, you leave the other person's books alone, it's all your stuff. Paper can sometimes be some shared decision-making, but definitely when it comes to the miscellaneous, you're probably gonna have to make some shared decision-making. So let's use kitchen as an example. So you wanna think about like what order of the miscellaneous, the komono, are you gonna go in? I would recommend trying to go, again, easiest to most difficult. That doesn't mean, you know, smallest to biggest or anything, just emotionally easiest to most difficult. So with the kitchen, you know, you're going to want to have a conversation with, you know, if it's your spouse or your partner about the appliances, about the spoons, the plates, the cutlery, and determine together what level of comfort you both have with the decision making. You know, some people are fine delegating that. You know, other people really want to have a say in it. And I would say, you know, be conservative in it. And when in doubt, assume that you want to get their permission on that. But yeah, this one can be when people really kind of, you know, need to reflect again on their vision and go back to that motivation of why they started it in the first place. Because this is a very large one. Yeah, other comments, questions about any of the categories so far?
I'm looking forward to reading that. I'm going to get that kids book too, because I'm like, I feel like most of the clutter in my life is child derived. And,
Yes.
you know, it'll be interesting to try to, like, you know, you got to lead by example, but you also sort of, I think, have to make decisions
Totally.
on their behalf.
Totally.
So
Sean, Of your two kids, so I have to ask, so yeah, Sean's daughter and my daughter are the same age, and his son's a little bit older. So what are their clutter personalities? So talk to us about that.
Henry's sort of a Tasmanian devil where he breaks stuff and we can just throw it away. It's fine. You know, he's a little bit rough and tumble.
Yep. So
He
if,
doesn't
is he like
accumulate.
emotionally, is he okay if it's like something's broken? Like, what's his attachment to
He
that?
gets over it pretty easy. Yeah.
That's a gift.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are certain things that you know, he has attachment to certain things, but I would say, at least compared to his sister, he lets go of stuff quite easily, whereas she has a lot of stuff, and she, you know, we have stuffed animals coming out of our ears, like it's there's a lot. And I think, you know, not to take up all the time, but I think the pandemic and you know, the emotional instability of what's going on has only exacerbated that, like her lack of like play dates with other kids, you know, has made like her attachment to her stuffed animals and her little piles of, you know, dollhouse here, dollhouse there, and the toys interact with different dollhouses as you go along, and you know, and her attachment to it. Like, for example, I dropped her off. She's she and her brother are spending the night at my in-laws, and she had forgotten a little suitcase full of these fingerling toys. And my mother-in-law drove back across town to come and pick them up and bring them, because I'm sure she was not stopping talking and being expressing her dismay at having forgotten them. So it's like to that level. So
Yes, so it sounds like Simone has the same clutter personality as my daughter Maggie does, like so similar. And I think, you know, what you said about the pandemic, you know, making this so hard on kids, I think is really, you know, is really wise and perceptive. And I think we need to understand that when dealing with our children and with any other family members, you know, like we're all traumatized by this year. And something that I have had to work on, because I have a different clutter personality, even though I was, you know, I was always a messy person, you know, going through this process has given me a different relationship with things than my daughter has now. So I cannot change and I cannot control how she feels about her stuffed animals, but I can reflect upon and I can maybe change my reaction to her relationship with her stuffed animals. So with children, you know, being a parent has definitely, you know, increased my understanding of like the level of patience and grace that we have to have with stuff, you know, and with other people. And I think that that's important. And, you know, I think with children who really love their things, especially in this difficult year, sometimes we just have to accept that like there's going to be a lot of toys around. A middle ground for that can be the old-fashioned solution of bins, you know, because it may be that she's going to keep 100% of those stuffed animals and you just need to get a couple bins to put them in, you know, and at least that will keep them kind of corralled. Because my daughter, you know, she would come home from, you know, going on a hike, and I would take her backpack off and it would be like 10 pounds heavier because she had seen like 10 pounds of the most beautiful rocks in the world and like put them in her backpack. We have moved forward on like, she now is better about getting rid of her old toothbrushes, you know, like it was that level of emotional attachment. So like, it's a process. You know, and sometimes you have to celebrate like the small wins of like,
how do you feel about the idea of like putting things in a bin and then removing them and seeing if they're missed, you know, for a certain amount of time, and if they're not missed, removing them from the house? Is that too dastardly?
Okay, so I'll say the official answer, Marie Kondo would not recommend that. I have done that.
Okay, all right.
Okay. So sometimes you just have to do what you have to do, especially when it comes to things that like, they're not going to miss, like stuffed animals maybe would be, you're kind of risking it there.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's like old, like, doodles and stuff that they've done that, they're not going to miss, like broken toys, sometimes you just have to like give it
Yeah.
a period of time where it's like in the basement. And then when they're at grandparents' house, like
Yeah.
get it out of there.
I think too
So-
about like the binky fairy. Did you ever do that? Where like
We
try to
did.
give a binky and
Yes.
you lie to the child again and tell
Yes.
them that there's a binky fairy that's going to come and clean them up and give them to babies who need them. So it's like
Yes.
a kind of
Yes.
gratitude thing.
Absolutely.
Maybe the angle of trying to convince them that it's something that's going to go to a good house and have
Yeah,
a good,
it's no more dastardly than Santa is.
right.
I mean, Santa, we're trading good behavior for toys. So
Sure.
like, it's basically the same.
Right,
It's
right.
the same concept. So, children who, who love their things, there's no one easy answer. Sometimes just going for those small wins.
Right. Thanks for letting me derail you. Go ahead.
Oh my gosh, no, it's so great. And it's a topic where that's, it's near and dear because my own daughter is the same way. So then lastly, with sentimental, just to address this a little bit, because we've talked about it this before, but this is the most difficult. But by the time you come to this, if you've gone through all the categories, your intuition and your practice of asking yourself what sparks joy is going to be so much stronger at this point that this will be easier than if you did it right off the bat. But you still want to have patience with yourself. Photographs can be a big, this can be a really big one. Some people have thousands and thousands of photographs, things that were passed down to us, anything that's sentimental. And you just want to be really realistic with yourself about like how much space do you have for the things that you want to keep, and kind of go through the process similar to the other categories. So I know our time is coming to an end, but I just want to see if there's any other questions here. I'll stop the share so that we can all be on screen.
How often do you schedule tidying festivals? Is it something that you do once a year, or you do once and you're done, and then you do smaller tidying?
So the theory is that once you do the tidying festival, like the full festival, you're never going to have to do another tidying festival again. So it's almost like this surgical procedure that like once you do it, you're not going to have to redo it again. You will have to do maintenance. And I will say, especially with the more people in your house, the more maintenance you'll have to do. The more children in your house, or, if you have a job or someone in your household has a job where they're always like bringing things in, you will have to do more maintenance. So it's not like you do it once and then you've got this like, perfect household with perfect storage. But once you do the tidying festival, then I think the traditional forms of organizing of, oh, I'm just going to address the bathroom today, or I'm just going to address the closet today, that becomes much easier. But the actual full tidying festival, the theory is that once you really do it in a complete way, you shouldn't have to repeat it. But maintenance is necessary. Yeah.
I was thinking those shows that crews come in and fix someone's life from the outside, and
I know, right?
I want to see like a week later they back.
Wouldn't that be great?
I was always impressed on the Netflix show with Marie Kondo that these celebrities would say, okay, so come on in and do it, and she says, no, you'll do it. Like I can tell you how,
Right.
but you have to do the work.
Well, that was some of the criticism that the show got. They're like, she's not doing anything. They're like, she comes, she gives advice, and then she leaves, and like, you have to, like, who's doing the work? But that was kind of the point.
Yeah.
In that if you have a professional just go in and do it for you, you're not internalizing that message, because you're going to have to internalize the message and the philosophy as you are deciding what is going to come in to your life. You know, because most of what we talked about was the process of addressing things in your home, but you're also going to carry the attitude for when you're out in the world and shopping for things. You know, so I've had things, and again, it's not a minimalism program, but it is going to change your perception of, wow, I just went through all this energy to do a tidying festival. Do I want to buy this sweater just because it's on sale? Or does it spark joy?
Spark and joy.
Yeah. So ideally, you know, we carry it with us, you know, as we continue. Oh, and I just noticed, so Ginny had a comment saying, I'm overwhelmed by paper. The mail keeps bringing more. Yeah. Yeah, this is hard. Do you want to speak on that a little bit more, Ginny? Because I do have some suggestions.
I have lots of paper from, you know, previous jobs that I kind of hung on to, and I have a file cabinet. I have a 4-drawer file cabinet and a 2-drawer file cabinet, and they're more than full.
Yeah.
And I've always been trying to work on getting rid of paper, and you know, part of it is that I don't deal with the mail promptly.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just today was dealing. I mean, I had I'll put the camera on here. This bag was full of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Some of what I pulled out were piles of appeals for money, but now they're 2 or 3 years old, and I've gotten several since. So those now are easy to throw out. But when they come in, I always say, well, you know, I really ought to give them money. So, you know, but I'm not ready to do that right now.
Right.
So I put them aside. And
you know, a lot of the challenges of decluttering, it's the decision making, right? So basically all clutter is deferred decision making. It's just a physical manifestation of deferred decision making. So when it comes to dealing with mail, especially with solicitations, part of the added decision making, it's not like, what do I do with this envelope? It's, do I give to this organization? You know, because once we're on one list, we might be on another, and there's so many worthy organizations out there. I found this challenge because I was getting a lot of solicitations, and I was like, well, if I only have X number of dollars, what's the best way to do that? You know, and there's no perfect answer. Each person wants to decide that for themselves. But one thing that could help, something that someone told me once, was make the decision at the beginning of the year and let that decision guide you for the rest of the year. So now is actually the perfect time. So you may, you know, if it feels right to you, you know, you might make a decision for 2021 and say, how much money do I want to give to charitable organizations either per year or per month, you know, whatever works best for your decision making. And then decide, you know, this week what organizations you're going to give to. So I've made that decision. I give to, like, I choose 1 or 2 local organizations, a state one, and then a national one, like depending on whatever, you know, resonates with you. And then I don't give to anyone else. So, and that can be hard because you're saying no, but it actually, by saying no and deciding ahead of time, this is who I'm giving to in 2021, it makes it easier to say yes to other people. And then whenever I get solicitations from places that aren't on those lists, I immediately recycle them.
yeah, well, I only give to things that are associated with my denomination or my town.
Yeah.
Or I did give to the Greater Boston Food Bank. But you know, I don't give just to. Well, and then there's every educational institution that I went to. two
Yep.
private, Simmons and my alma mater, my undergraduate place. My first job is a
Mhm.
private boarding school, so they need money.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're good, and they're going to keep asking for money. But I think that the challenge is, it's a decision making. That can be the challenge with paper.
Keep a list
Um,
maybe, and review it every beginning of the year.
yeah,
And make the decisions then.
exactly.
I also, we have a big pile of mail, and I try to go through it once a week. I think I'd be better off to go through it as it comes in
Yeah.
and recycle right away what
Mhm.
are just solicitations.
Mhm.
And then I recently heard about someone having a middle file. So there's there's the to-do file, there's the circular file for solicitations or advertisements or things you just want to get rid of right away, and then the
Right.
middle as like a time will tell, So
Mhm.
maybe like a weight pile,
Yep.
things that are not like time sensitive, but you're not ready to make a decision on it just yet.
Exactly.
Maybe have a place for that to be.
Exactly. And I think what you said, processing mail immediately is, it's kind of like, it's like the dishes, if you can, the quicker you can do them, it really like cuts down dramatically on the overall time. The same with mail, if you can get into a habit of processing it every day, because we know it's going to come every day. It usually comes at the same time every day. It's very predictable. If we can make our response as predictable, it can kind of cut down on the overwhelm. But yeah, it's a hard one. It's a hard one. And I think I would, with stuff that's archived, that's been in those file cabinets, you want to ask yourself, if it all went up in a fire, would you really miss it?
Yeah,
And if you
but I can't find the last version of my will.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in one of those file cabinets.
Yeah. That is the danger of, having a lot of papers, is that you have the really important stuff mixed up with the not as important stuff.
We try to I have a fireproof bag. We don't have a safe or anything, but
Yeah.
the things that are really important will go in the fireproof bag, and anything else I guess can just it doesn't really matter if we hang on to it too much.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also this is where it can be helpful to think about the emotional part of it, because we typically hold on to things, especially paper, because most of the paper is kind of boring if we're not reviewing it regularly. And if it's not sentimental, I'm not talking about artwork or sentimental stuff, but old work stuff or old school stuff or financial stuff, we typically hold on to it out of fear, that we'll need it in the future. And I think just really thinking about is it worth it for me to hold on to this because of fear, or would it be, liberating in some way to get rid of it?
Thank you, Maile. I want to be mindful of time. It's about 8:20.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so if folks have any other things in the chat, now's the time. Any other questions, if you want to come off mute or write them in the chat.
Thank you so much. Thank
I'm
you.
going to
It's very
stop the
interesting.
recording.
Thank you so much for attending. I'm just so thankful that everyone took time out of their Tuesday evening to spend time with us. This is great. I always love these conversations. And thank you again to the Pollard Library. Thank you to Sean. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great.